I always believed I was a man of steady principles, the sort of person who drew clear lines and never allowed them to blur. My name is Daniel, and for the past 5 years, I have been in a committed relationship with Michael. Together, we built a life that looked perfect from the outside. An apartment filled with laughter, weekend brunches, holidays spent with each other's families. But perfection, I've come to learn, is a fragile mask. Beneath it lingered silences, unspoken resentments, and a distance that neither of us had the courage to address. It was during this slow drift that Alex appeared. He wasn't a stranger, exactly. He worked at the same firm, in a different department, someone I passed in hallways, but never really noticed. That changed one late evening when we both found ourselves in the deserted office, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above us. I was gathering my things when he approached, offering a half-smile. "You always stay late, don't you?" he asked casually. His voice carried a warmth that contrasted with the sterile room. I laughed, admitting I was buried under deadlines. Somehow, what should have been a short exchange stretched into a conversation that lasted nearly an hour. We discovered shared frustrations with work, mutual taste in music, even similar childhood stories. By the time we finally left, the streets outside were empty, and a strange spark had settled in my chest. Over the next weeks, our paths crossed more often. At first, it was coincidence, grabbing coffee at the same time, stepping into the elevator together. But soon it was deliberate. We started meeting during lunch breaks, trading jokes that made the hours feel lighter. He had an easy charm, a way of asking questions that made me feel as though my words mattered. One evening, as we sat on a bench outside the office, Alex asked, "Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" The question cut deeper than I expected. I thought of Michael, of our routine dinners where conversations skimmed only the surface, of the nights spent scrolling on our phones rather than looking at each other. I hesitated before answering, sometimes, yeah. He didn't press, but his silence felt understanding, almost conspiratorial. That night, lying next to Michael, I realized how vividly Alex's words echoed in my mind. From then on, our conversations shifted subtly. They became more personal, more intimate. He told me about a relationship that had ended badly, about how he felt unseen by people who claimed to care. I admitted in vague terms that things between Michael and me weren't as effortless as they once had been. Confiding in him felt strangely liberating, like opening a window in a stuffy room. Yet, with every confession came guilt. I told myself it was harmless, that friendships can be close without crossing boundaries. But late at night, staring at my phone, waiting for Alex's name to appear, I knew I was lying to myself. One Friday, after everyone had left the office, Alex asked if I wanted to stay behind for a drink. He had a small bottle of whiskey tucked in his bag, and we poured it into paper cups, laughing at our makeshift bar. The dim light softened the sharp edges of the room, and I felt a reckless comfort settle between us. At one point, our laughter faded into quiet. He looked at me for a moment too long, his expression unreadable. Then softly he said, "Show me the real you, Daniel. Not the version you think everyone expects." My pulse quickened. The request wasn't physical, not yet, but it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. In that instant, I realized the line I'd promised never to cross was right there at my feet waiting. I should have walked away, ended the night with a polite excuse, gone home to Michael and pretended nothing had changed, but something inside me refused. Maybe it was the loneliness I hadn't admitted, maybe it was the thrill of being seen so clearly. Whatever the reason, I couldn't bring myself to say no. And with that silence, my failure to resist, everything began. The first step into betrayal was quieter than I had imagined. There was no dramatic declaration, no sudden collapse of loyalty. Instead, it was a slow surrender, moments layered upon moments until I was too far in to claim innocence. After that night in the office, Alex and I began to orbit each other with a new gravity. Every message we exchanged carried an unspoken charge, every glance lingered just a little too long. At work, we maintained the facade of colleagues, but beneath it pulsed a current that only we could feel. One evening, when Michael texted to say he'd be working late, I found myself typing Alex's name instead of going home. We met at a quiet cafe across town where the dim lighting cloaked us in secrecy. The conversation started innocently enough, complaints about deadlines, jokes about our coworkers, but then he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. It was such a small gesture, yet it jolted through me like a confession. I didn't pull away. That touch opened a door I had spent years keeping locked. Soon we were meeting more often. Late dinners, walks along empty streets, stolen hours carved out of otherwise ordinary days. Each encounter chipped away at the life I shared with Michael, though I tried not to see it that way. I convinced myself it was only temporary, a release valve for pressure I couldn't explain, but the truth was simpler. I wanted what Alex gave me, and I wasn't ready to let it go. In his presence, I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. He laughed at my dry humor, noticed when my mood shifted, listened with an attentiveness that made me feel undeniable. With him, there were no silences weighted with resentment, no conversations cut short by distraction. Instead, there was urgency, heat, and the dangerous thrill of knowing we were trespassing. But the deeper we went, the heavier the deception became. I found myself inventing excuses with Michael, claiming late meetings, sudden errands, a need for space. Each lie slid off my tongue more easily than the last, but afterward I would sit in the quiet of our apartment, heart racing, wondering how long the charade could hold. Michael noticed, of course. One night, as we cleared the dinner table, he asked, "Is everything okay? You've been distant." I forced a smile, kissed his cheek, and said I was just tired. The guilt in that moment was suffocating, yet not strong enough to keep me from slipping away again the very next evening. Alex, on the other hand, seemed emboldened by our secrecy. "Why do we keep hiding?" he asked one night, his voice low but firm. "Don't you want something real?" His question unsettled me. What we had was already dangerously real, but he wanted more time, more presence, more of me. I hesitated, torn between two worlds. The stability of Michael, who had built a life beside me, and the fire of Alex, who awakened something I had long buried. That tension followed me everywhere. At work, my focus fractured. At home, my laughter felt hollow. Yet, whenever Alex called, I answered. The pull was undeniable, like a tide I couldn't resist. The secrecy itself became part of the intoxication. Sneaking glances across the office, slipping out of meetings to reply to his messages, feeling my phone buzz in my pocket while Michael sat beside me. All of it fed the dangerous rush. Every risk made the connection feel sharper, as if we were writing our own forbidden story in invisible ink. Still, unease grew inside me. There were nights I lay awake beside Michael, guilt pressing so heavily against my chest I thought I might wake him. I wondered what he would say if he knew, if he'd see the betrayal as weakness or proof that I no longer loved him. I told myself I did love him, but then why couldn't I stay away from Alex? The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Michael had planned a quiet day for us, groceries, a movie, nothing remarkable. The double life could not last forever. Secrets have a way of leaking through the smallest cracks, and mine had grown into a widening fracture that threatened to split everything I had built. It began with small things Michael noticed, missed calls, distracted answers, moments when my eyes were elsewhere. He didn't accuse, not at first, but his silence carried suspicion. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he asked carefully, "Is there someone else?" The question landed like a stone in my chest. I denied it too quickly, too forcefully. His eyes lingered on me, searching for truth, but he said nothing more. That silence was worse than anger. It meant he already knew. Meanwhile, Alex pressed harder. The stolen hours were no longer enough for him. "You can't keep living like this," he said one night as we sat in his apartment, blinds drawn, the world shut out. "Choose me, or let me go." His ultimatum tightened around me like a noose. I wanted to promise him everything, but the weight of Michael's loyalty still anchored me. Michael had stood by me through family losses, career failures, countless quiet nights when no one else was there. To betray him was to sever something that had shaped my very life. Yet the hunger Alex stirred in me felt undeniable, as though I had rediscovered a part of myself I thought was gone. I walked through each day hollowed out, caught between two men and two versions of myself. At work, my phone burned in my pocket with Alex's messages. At home, Michael's gaze lingered, heavy with questions he no longer voiced. Every lie I told cracked me further. The breaking point arrived sooner than I expected. One evening, Michael found my phone buzzing on the counter. Alex's name lit the screen with a message I hadn't yet read. Michael's silence as he handed the phone back was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. "Daniel," he said quietly, "I don't want excuses. I just want the truth." There it was, the moment I could no longer dodge. My throat tightened as words failed me. He didn't push. He only stood, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door softly. That gentleness was unbearable. I spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, torn between rushing to Alex's arms and clinging to the fragments of the life I had with Michael. By morning, nothing was decided, yet everything had changed. In the days that followed, Michael withdrew. Meals passed in silence, our routines reduced to mechanical gestures. The warmth that had once filled our apartment was gone, replaced by a brittle distance. I tried to reach for him, to pretend we could mend the break, but he looked at me with eyes that no longer trusted. Alex, too, grew restless. "If you can't leave him, then what are we doing?" he asked, his voice edged with frustration. "I won't be your secret forever." I had no answer, because either choice meant loss. To stay with Michael was to deny the passion Alex awakened. To choose Alex was to destroy the foundation Michael and I had built together. One evening, as I stood between them, Michael waiting for honesty, Alex demanding commitment, I realized that infidelity offers no winners. It promises escape, thrill, the illusion of being seen, but it extracts a cost that cannot be undone. I never delivered the neat choice Alex demanded. He grew tired of waiting and eventually drifted away, leaving only unanswered messages and the ghost of his laughter. With Michael, the damage was irreversible. We tried, briefly, to salvage what remained, but trust, once shattered, cannot be pieced together without the cracks showing. Eventually, he left too, his absence filling the apartment like a hollow echo. And so I was left alone, with no partner, no lover, only the silence of my own decisions. I think often of the moment it all began that night when Alex asked me to show him the real me. I wonder what would have happened if I had said no, if I had gone home to Michael and closed the door on temptation. Perhaps my life would still be intact. Perhaps not. What I know is this: infidelity doesn't simply end when the affair ends. It lingers, reshaping how you see yourself, how you understand love, how you measure loyalty. Alex asked, and I couldn't say no. Life after betrayal is quieter, but it is not peaceful. When Michael left, the apartment felt cavernous, each room echoing with memories of what had once been ordinary routines. His mug still sat on the kitchen shelf, his jacket hung by the door, as though he might return any minute. But he didn't. Days turned into weeks, and the stillness only deepened. At first, I tried to fill the silence with distractions. I worked longer hours, joined colleagues for drinks I barely tasted, scrolled endlessly through my phone at night. But no amount of noise could drown out the questions that kept surfacing. Why hadn't I stopped myself? Why had I let Alex's attention feel like salvation when it was only temptation? Alex, too, was gone. His absence was sharper in some ways because it carried no closure. One day his messages were insistent, demanding, full of longing. The next they ceased altogether. I told myself I should feel relieved, freed from the impossible choice he had forced on me. Instead, I felt hollow. The passion that once electrified my days had vanished, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. In that void, reflection began. I realized how much of myself I had lost by trying to be two different men, Michael's partner at home, Alex's secret elsewhere. Splitting myself that way had left me fractured, unable to be whole for either of them or for myself. Friends noticed the change. A coworker asked if I was okay, pointing out how tired I looked. I brushed it off, unwilling to confess the truth. Infidelity thrives in secrecy, and even after it was over, shame kept me from speaking aloud what I had done. The hardest moments came at night. I would lie awake, replaying conversations in my head. Michael's quiet question, "Is there someone else?" Alex's plea, "Choose me or let me go." Both voices haunted me, accusing and tender at once. I wondered if either of them thought of me still, or if I had already become nothing more than a painful chapter in their lives. Eventually, I started journaling. It felt safer to confess to paper than to people. I wrote about the loneliness that had crept into my relationship with Michael, about the thrill Alex had offered, about the lies that piled higher until they toppled. Writing forced me to confront my own weakness, not as an excuse, but as a truth I could no longer avoid. Slowly, the pages filled with something else, a search for forgiveness. Not from Michael, who owed me nothing, nor from Alex, who had moved on. Forgiveness for myself. It was the hardest to seek, and even harder to grant. One evening, months later, I ran into Michael by chance at a bookstore. We stood among the shelves, awkward in the way people are when they once shared everything and now share only silence. He looked well, lighter somehow, as though leaving me had lifted a burden. We exchanged polite words. He told me he was doing fine, and I believed him. When I asked if he was happy, he gave a small, genuine smile. That smile pierced me deeper than anger ever could. It told me he had rebuilt, that he had found peace, perhaps even love again. And I realized that I wanted that for him, even if I could never be the one to give it. After he left, I stood alone between the shelves, holding a book I hadn't meant to pick up. The weight of the past settled around me, but for the first time, it didn't crush me. It simply reminded me of the cost of my choices. Infidelity doesn't end with discovery or departure. Its echoes linger in memory, in regret, in the way it reshapes how you move through the world. I carry those echoes still, but I no longer let them define me. Alex asked me once to show him the real me. I think, finally, I am learning